My name is Isabel Richard, and this is my near-death experience caused by ruptured fallopian tube and internal bleeding. This is hard to do because it happened so long ago, but the most important message I was told by the beings of light was to tell others. Of course, back in the 1970s, the phenomena of NDEs was not widely known, so I was considered a bit daft when I tell the story. It's a long story. My husband was a deputy sheriff, and I was the mother of a busy 2-year-old son. I had been to the doctor with symptoms of pain and a feeling I was pregnant, but that something was wrong. He told me it was a cold that had settled in my uterus, and that when I experienced pain, I should take a warm bath. One Sunday I came home from church, and the pain returned. My husband was at work. I took an aspirin and drank a beer. When my son was asleep for his afternoon nap, I took a bath in our large old claw-footed bathtub. I became weaker and weaker until I feared I couldn't get out of the tub. Finally, I managed to get out and grab the enormous robe I'd worn when pregnant with my son from the hook on the bathroom door. Our bathroom was upstairs, but I made it down the stairs to the living room couch. My 2-year-old woke up and found me. I was terribly weak and in pain. I felt like I would lose consciousness. I got to the phone and called the sheriff's office dispatch. They said my husband was busy with a traffic accident and would come home when his work was done. I called my husband's aunt. She said her father was ill, but if she got him taken care of, she would come. I got back to the couch and told my son to go to the neighbors, elderly people he was always running over there to visit, and stay there if Mommy fell asleep and wouldn't wake up. My husband's aunt finally came. My son played with toys near us. The pain got worse. My husband came home and called the doctor. He left for pain medicine. The pain was by now nearly intolerable. My husband came back with Tylenol 3, which riled me so badly I jumped off the couch with a rage I never experienced before or since, and went after him screaming and cursing. Then I fell back on the couch, weak as a dish rag. He knelt beside me and told me to take out my contact lenses. I told him I couldn't. He said I had to. I said fine. I lifted up my head, popped my contacts into his hand, and went into convulsions. He slapped me conscious, ran to the phone, called the doctor, cussed, and screamed at him that his wife was dying and to get his fat ass over here. He also called the ambulance. The pain was gone, but I felt loopy. I couldn't stay conscious continually. I was in and out, with every beat of my heart. My husband told me later that the doctor dismissed the ambulance and told him to bring his car around front. I know, we should have sued the doctor, but we didn't. My husband realized later that the doctor thought he would bring his patrol car and drive to the hospital with lights and siren, but my husband brought our family car. The ambulance people were still there and put me on a stretcher, and I was loaded into the family car. The doctor followed to the med center in his car. When I was on the stretcher, I saw my husband and son dressed in black funeral clothes and holding hands. The looks on their faces were heart-wrenching. My husband looked as lost and forlorn, and my little boy. I hadn't been in the back seat of the car very long when I felt a floating sensation and warmth filling me up like hot chocolate on a cold winter's day. The floating turned to flying and euphoria. I had never felt so good in my entire life. I thought, if this is death, boy, are sick or disabled or elderly people in for a wonderful surprise. I'm young and healthy, but this is so much better. I realized how heavy my body had been, how many aches or pains I had had and not realized. To be free of my body, flying, was amazing. Then I was in a dark tunnel. The now proverbial light was at the end of the tunnel, and I was moving toward it. I sensed beings in the darkness surrounding the tunnel. They were crying out to me in anguish. I recognized 2 of them. They were begging me to help them. I felt so powerful, invincible, that I moved toward them to grab their hands and bring them out of the dark and into the tunnel. A voice told me sternly not to do that. He said, yes, it was a he, that there were rules, and I didn't know them. I could not take people out of the darkness, but they could drag me into it. He said to keep going straight ahead, and that I knew nothing about anything, and shouldn't presume that I did or I could get into trouble. I reached the precipice at the end of the tunnel. There were spherical lights as far as I could see. Inside the spheres were searing bright white lines that reminded me of the filaments of an electric light bulb. I remember distinctly thinking that I had to find something earthly to compare the insides of the spheres to, in case I ever had the chance to tell anyone. And I settled on the filaments inside a light bulb. I wanted to run. I knew if I joined these lights, I would be one of them forever. I didn't know who they were or what they did, but I knew that they weren't idle. They had a purpose. The voice reminded me of the vision I had of my husband and son in funeral clothes. He said if I didn't go back to them, I would disrupt some plan. The plan would be repaired, and everything would eventually be okay, so I could go ahead if I wanted. The consequences of my untimely demise would be that my husband and son would suffer in ways I could not imagine, and I would know that these sufferings were because of my selfish decision not to go back. I would know this throughout eternity. It would not be a huge sadness for me to bear, more like a prick of conscience that could never be totally healed. No big deal, unless you consider how long eternity is. So I said, okay, I'll go back, but can I at least just finish whatever it is I'm supposed to do and then die, skipping the whole old age thing? It was as if I had said the funniest thing ever. I heard the whole cosmos laughing. I got the impression that time was an illusion, and to these beings, a second or a millennium was equivalencies. I heard a voice calling as if from far, far and away. The voice said, I need you. Then I saw green and a car door handle. I asked, where am I? My husband said that we were on Highway 61 on the way to the Burlington Medical Center. I realized I was in a car, on a highway. I was in and out of consciousness again. We got to the hospital, and I could only hear every other word spoken by the doc and my husband. I was taken to a room where the longest needle I had ever seen was inserted into my uterus to withdraw blood. I seemed to be able to stay conscious then. I screamed when the needle was inserted, but otherwise was rather circumspect. They brought me a warm blanket. I went to surgery. At some time during the surgery, I found myself in a long black hallway. I was moving uncomfortably fast. I didn't seem to have legs or feet to stop myself with. I saw a light. I went toward it. I thought perhaps if I concentrated on turning that, I could turn into the room where the light was. It worked. The next thing I knew, I was staring out over the Mississippi River. It was getting dark. Cars had their lights on. The bridge separating Iowa and Illinois had cars stopping to pay the toll. I thought that I should go down, peek in the window of the car, and if folks screamed, I would know that I was a ghost. Then I remembered what the guy had said. I don't know the rules. I thought, what if I get stuck out on the Mississippi River and am a ghost forever frightening folks in order to stave off boredom? I decided to turn around. If I passed through something solid, I would know that I really was a ghost. I turned around and saw a window with molding. My husband told me later that a light was on in that room because it was a makeshift waiting room that a nurse had told him to wait in. It was on the 4th floor of the old Burlington Hospital by the river. If you looked down from the 4th floor, you would see that toll bridge. It's really freaky to think that this really happened. The building is no longer a hospital, but every time I cross that bridge, I look up at the 4th floor of that building. My husband saw me float through that room and right through the window. He said I looked like fuzzy TV reception. Years later, he saw white satin pajamas and said that I had looked like I was dressed in white satin when I went through the window. He said he looked at the clock in the room so that he would remember what time I died. It said 8 o'clock. I never saw my husband in the room. I traveled through it too fast. The doctor who operated on me wasn't the same one who came to the house, but he was the physician on call that night. After the surgery, when he came into the recovery room and I was conscious, I felt total love for him and thought, if it couldn't be me, I'm glad that this wonderful man gets to go. I felt a bubble of love surrounding both him and me. There was a resident with him who seemed very nervous around me. The doctor and I were in some sort of surreal bubble of love and light. The resident was annoying. When I returned to the doctor's office in Burlington to get my stitches removed, everyone was very sad. I was told that I wouldn't be seeing the doctor who had operated on me because he had died a few days before of a sudden massive stroke. Instead, my own incompetent doctor took my stitches out. I asked him if euphoria accompanied shock, because I couldn't make sense of what had happened. He told me no, but looked away and mumbled something about rare reports. I didn't tell him anything else. I didn't trust him. Watch this near-death experience next about a woman who saw the afterlife caused by sleep paralysis.